What's good, guys? It's been a little bit since I've recorded a video, and actually the past few sessions have been super exciting, but I've had a lot going on in my life. I finished up school. I had to drive out east for a funeral, actually, and then, came back and took finals, finished up school and all that, so things have been pretty busy. This episode is going to be a little different, and I'll keep it short right now because it's a fairly long episode. We're actually hanging out with a couple of the guys from the group. I wanted it to be a little more conversational. I ended up doing some interview style questions, but overall it's still a discussion about how the campaign has gone and what these players think about themselves, their player characters, and the campaign, the setting, and all that kind of stuff. So sit back, relax. Without further ado, check it out. This episode, for all the people that watch that are actually here, in fact. So instead of actually recapping a D&D session or sessions, we're just going to discuss the campaign from where you're feeling, what you guys are feeling from here on out. Now, a lot of the early campaign we've already discussed, so most of the discussion will be like recent from what we've done and what has recently happened, because a lot of the few viewers that we have know that we've been in the Ravenloft setting in Curse of Strahd for the relative past, really, honestly. So I'm pretty sure the last video we did, we were already in Vallaki in the last video. I don't know if you guys remember watching the last one. But so far, I know with Curse of Strahd, whether it's actual sanctioned D&D content or homebrew stuff, there's just a lot that happens in Vallaki, and before I get into what, or my perspective, we can introduce ourselves. This isn't the entire party, but this is some of the key players here. We'll just talk about kind of who you are, introduce yourself and your character, and then what your perspective would be, I guess, on what's happening. You want to go first?
Sure. So my name is Ricky. I play Alistair in our campaign, and currently I have a mix of a level 3 Mastermind Rogue and a level 3 College of Lore Bard. So very much the skill monkey.
All right.
And I'm Jason. I play a Nod the Scholar. He is a level 6 Tiefling Warlock, Pact of the Chain.
So, I will have to say, as far as the entire campaign goes, Anand has been, I would say the better way to put it would be the most complex character. So he's offered a lot of interesting situations socially and even in combat with your familiar being, the imp knock, right?
Yep.
So, at least from the DM's perspective, looking at the player's handbook, everything that Anand has done with his familiar knock has been textbook. It has been textbook, but it presents some challenges. I would say, I guess, what would be your thoughts on how you utilize knock in situation, but specifically Ravenloft, where Anand and Knock the Imp is not entirely sure what is watching from the air and the land. Take, I guess, Old Bone Grinder, the windmill, as an instance, or example, which that was a learning experience for all of us. So, I mean, for me, there were things that I learned on how to handle situations with something that is a familiar that is almost its own character.
But he's also an asshole. Yeah.
And he's an imp, so imps are assholes. I mean,
so I know that according to the everything, he's supposed to actually be a fey creature in this form, but I play him like he's actually an imp. So he is more on the, since he's a fiend, he's more on the lawful evil. So he'll do what he's supposed to do, but he wiggles as much as he can through that. So he does everything he's told, but he does it a lot. There's a lot of sarcasm, a lot of sass. I use him a lot to scout for us. Whenever possible, he'll actually go with the rogue and then let us know back, so that way he can keep going and he doesn't have to stop. They'll both scout in different directions if there's multiple directions. When we're actually out and about, I actually have him flying around above us, usually as a raven or invisible, and keeping an eye above us, so that way he can tell me telepathically what's going on, so that way we can actually not be surprised nearly as much. He also uses his spider form quite a bit, so that he can go around and sneak into small spots and kind of go. And actually, I've used him a number of times on the rogue to see what the rogue's doing, because he's a spider, like just on his clothes, in his hood, and he can't tell. So we do a lot of things like that with Knock.
So as a DM, I feel like I might have mentioned in other videos, it's posed some challenges as a DM because, as written, an imp can fly ahead, it can be invisible, it can communicate telepathically, and for a DM that can spoil a lot of things that you had planned that should have been a surprise for the party. And so honestly, it is in a way kind of helped make the creative process give me more of a challenge to how do I handle this, I guess. Like how do I present challenges to not only the party but also the imp. And then also for the rogue, a rogue is typically a scout and someone that can sneak ahead, and it's his job to report back to the party what's happening in front of them. And when you have an invisible imp that can go ahead and communicate telepathically back, I would say, I mean, what do you, as far as you go with a rogue, like, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think that's kind of overshadowed your role as a rogue, or do you think you've like worked with that and learned from that and adapted, or do you think you work well together with the imp, or do you think maybe he's kind of, as an imp, he's an asshole and kind of like just does his own thing? What do you think?
I definitely think as a player in the game, so somebody outside of it, it's definitely nice to have an imp around, because then when there is two splits, it's like, all right, Alistair, you go left, Knock, you go right, we'll go and figure it out. But playing as Alistair, it's definitely this nice mix of like, Knock is here to help, but he's also the asshole who's stealing my job kind of deal. I know one time in the campaign, Anand asked Alistair, he's like, so can you teach Knock how to steal, like, and pickpocket people the way you do? And I was like, no, there's no way I'm gonna do that. Like, that's Alistair's bread and butter. That's what he's here for. So plus
I feel like, if you taught the imp how to steal, he might steal from you.
Right.
Oh, he would, flat out.
And he would.
Yeah.
So, and I think just kind of coming in that perspective, and that's one of the reasons I built Alistair the way I did, even beyond Knock, just for the campaign itself, is, compared to our Paladin, everybody else, I'm not going to be the one who's doing the most damage. But as the skill monkey, I have a lot of things that I can do, even without being invisible, that, if I want to go search a room, I can do that. If I want to be stealthy, I can do that. If I want to, even in tonight's, I had a history check of all things, and I've got enough buffs around the way that it's like, oh yeah, I've still got like +5, +6, +7. So it's kind of nice to be able to maybe not always meet the traditional rogue route because we have Knock around, but still be able to kind of do some stuff in conjunction with him.
And one of the things we also use Knock for, since he does have a help action on his turn, he actually usually hangs out with Alistair, so that a way he can always get sneak attack, because he can not the help action. He can actually help with flanking, and he can do things to give him advantage. So we do a lot of that, which really works. And I think one of the big reasons why he also doesn't get mad at Knock as much is because a nod is always, whenever we're in town, helping him steal from people, because he's got minor illusion, prestidigitation. No, not prestidigitation, but thaumaturgy. And he does all that, and like we've used Mage Hand a couple times to do those. So we do a lot to distract people while he steals from them, and sometimes remembers to split it with me.
So I guess if you want to know what's happened with the campaign so far, I mean, watch the previous videos. A lot of my viewership comes from the people that are in the campaign, just to see kind of my side of things. And I know there are tons of videos out there of people documenting their own D&D experience, but the beauty of it is every single D&D experience is different. Whether you're someone that's been playing for years or you're a new player, every single D&D game, even though right now we're running through Curse of Strahd, my version and our run through Curse of Strahd is going to be completely different from, it may have some similarities, but be completely different from, anybody else's version of Curse of Strahd because there's so many variables that you just can't plan for. And we can talk. We can talk about what I think our highlights of the campaign are, or have been so far. I think honestly one of the things that comes to mind for me would be like when you guys overthrew the evil tyrant of Daggerford. And then I think what what happened from there is if you're going through a classic fantasy story, the good guys band together, they're against all odds, they overthrow the evil lord, and then they lived happily ever after. And I think what we found out with our campaign is there was a brief moment where we think maybe they'll live happily ever after. They get a plot of land outside Daggerford up towards the Dellenber Vale, and then almost immediately after that happens, you guys notice that there are some struggles within that wildland out there, the hinterlands outside of Daggerford and up the river. And then almost immediately you guys are yoinked out to this strange land you've never seen before that seems to be just depressed. For me, as the DM, I feel like that has kept you guys on your toes. Because as soon as somebody feels like in the party that you have some sense of security, I want to allow you guys to feel that for a minute. Like, you don't want to just completely never let your players feel like that they can't win. But then once you guys won, you guys had a minute, you guys go up the river, you scout your plot of land, you realize there's some bands of orcs up there, and you overthrow one of them, but then almost immediately, first of all, Anad is confronted with a moral dilemma because he has a curse, and then he decides to lift that curse. He kills someone good, which is very much an internal conflict for Anad. And then almost immediately, you guys are presented with people that ask for your help to save their distant land. And almost before you can even comprehend what that means, you guys are spirited away to this land, which is Ravenloft. So, I mean, think of this. We started this campaign back in February or March of 2019, so it hasn't been quite a full year yet. But as far as the game goes, you guys have been adventurers from level 1 for about four months, maybe, give or take. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you think of all the things that have happened in the past 4 months as tumultuous, what do you think your characters would be feeling and how you're approaching situations right now?
Anod's complex, so his will take a little while, so why don't you go first?
Well, I think even before you can jump into that, and I'm going to kind of go back to something you said earlier. You mentioned when we liberated Daggerford, you said the good guys band together and they all live happily ever after. Even now at this point in the campaign, even speaking for Alistair, who is a true neutral across the board, I think even in our own party sometimes it's hard to tell who the good guys are. And I know that sounds, we're the adventurers, we're the good guys. But even then, like, we make jokes all the time, like, we'll fight everybody together, and as soon as the bodies are on the floor, everybody grabs their dice, and it's like, an investigate check, and we just all start running as fast as we can to get stuff. And unless somebody, Alistair's guilty of it, if somebody sees him get into a treasure chest, yeah, he'll share some of it. If people don't see me, I'll take everything for myself. And I think coming into this, even for Alistair, especially here in Ravenloft and all of this, just trying to figure out, how he fits in all this, where does his allegiance lie? I mean, truthfully, the way I play him, the only person he's really loyal to is himself. I think he'll help these guys as long as they all have a common goal kind of deal, but I also don't want to say, no foreshadowing, no offense, Anad, but I think if Alistair had to cut somebody in the back to keep his own skin out of, I think he would. I know that sounds awful, but
I would have to say, so with D&D, and especially I feel like with new players, true neutral or neutral, whatever you want to call it, with some people it may feel like a cop-out, and I would say as far as Alistair goes, that character has been played almost like a nihilist, like true neutral, like good or bad, I'm going to do what seems to be the best to me in the moment. And there are a lot of people that abuse that true neutral alignment as just kind of an excuse to not really decide who they are and just kind of do what they want. And I feel like, honestly, and not even for the video, but honestly, I feel like Alistair truly has. There have been times where he's like, well, if I help the party, it may help me or may be okay. And then there are other times, like you said, if people aren't watching you and you're looting a body or a treasure chest, it's like, nobody's watching me, man. I'm going to take all of this. And I think, honestly, here, there, and in between, I think, honestly, as far as a neutral character goes, he's been played pretty well with that. Again, though, Anad has been, I think he started as neutral good or lawful good?
Chaotic good.
Chaotic good. So whatever is good, I mean, he was going for it. And now I feel like, things have shifted a little bit.
So I like story, so he's got a pretty long backstory.
A 7-page backstory, to be honest.
But the thing is, he didn't have the traditional D&D youth. Like, his parents didn't die. He actually had a really nice upbringing, and he was actually tricked into being a warlock through a series of events. So he's not the traditional warlock either. So he was chaotic good. Now, he does want power. Like, don't get me wrong, he does want power, but he wants power so he can help people. That's his idea. And he kind of got wrapped up into that to the points where he actually almost killed somebody that was mind-controlled early on when we defeated the Lord who'd taken over Daggerford because he didn't know that she was mind-controlled because low wisdom. So he Eldritch blasted her in her face, and she almost fell off of a cliff and died. It was pretty bad because he thought she was still the enemy. And that kind of hardened him a little bit. And then when we went to the land that we had gotten and we had to fight the orcs, he was trying like crazy to make peace with the orcs, and they refused, so he had to kill them. And that hardened him a little bit. And then he got cursed with some blades he couldn't put down. And now for him, everything's out of whack. He can't gain power because he can't use his spells. He's got a weapon in each hand. He can't do anything. And we got a cleric to come, all this stuff. And while he's off with the cleric says, I might be able to help you, and this is how much it's going to cost. And so a nod, just split-second decision, stabbed both swords through the guy's heart, lied to everybody, acted like it was the guy was trying to remove the curse, and the swords attacked him and impaled him, mourned it, and then he realized that this guy was a cleric of Lathander, which is the religion his family followed. And it tore him up. And that quickly followed by Ravenloft has totally changed the trajectory of this character. That changed him from chaotic good to chaotic neutral. He's still trying to get back to there. He's still, because he does want to be good, he kind of feels like his moral compass is broken, though, from when he was a child. So he has been looking to the party. And luckily, when he got cursed, Droglar, our druid, stepped up and helped him a little bit. So he's kind of does look to Droglar to be the moral compass. And actually, all this stuff that was mentioned about the party with how we kind of go all for ourselves when it comes to loot, that's actually been bothering Anad a lot. And it's driving a wedge between him and the party. I've actually talked to Chad about this a number of times. Like, what are we going to do with Anad? Because this is bothering him immensely. The way these things are going. But he's been battered. He's been emotionally battered. He's almost died a couple of times. It's been pretty hard for him. And so he's trying to balance that need for power with the need for protecting people, and how much can you hurt people to get enough power to protect other people.
So, I think for me, I've noticed that what I've kind of gathered is Anad, I don't want to say sheltered, but he really was kind of a sheltered child, and he was taught a certain way of life. And then when he leaves his home, he realizes that the way the actual world works is so much more different and intense than he expected. And for me as a DM, I felt almost proud of the fact Ravenloft is supposed to usher in just a state of ambiguity and confusion. How do you think you guys' characters have changed since we have introduced the Ravenloft setting? From the Sword Coast, which you were kind of used to before. I mean, Anad, especially, his title was Anad the Scholar, and he had studied books and he had read his whole life, and he had learned a lot of things about the races and the lore and the history of the Sword Coast, and now he's in this different plane that doesn't even register with him, that has moral implications that he wasn't really ready for. So, I mean, I would say, okay, so starting with Alistair, and again, so just a brief aside, we have Alistair and we have Anad, and then we're missing Droglar, and we're missing Stellan, which is, so Droglar is our druid, he's a half-orc druid, and then Stellan is our human paladin.
Fighter mix.
Paladin fighter mix, yeah, you're right, yeah.
Let's be honest, Stellan's our party drunk.
Drunk.
He's the party drunk.
His deity is named Hor. I think I've discussed in prior videos, but Stellan has made some decisions that normally he would usually just ignore and go to the pub and drink. So the actual player, not the player character, but the player who plays Stellan has been absent for the last couple missions. So we've been saying that he's nursing a bad hangover back at the inn. Back around to my original question, I think as far as how your characters have changed and their viewpoints have changed once you hit Barovia, where do you think your characters, how do you think they've changed since you guys left the Sword Coast and were spirited away to Ravenloft?
I would say for Alistair, for sure, bits and pieces, both in the Sword Coast setting and in the Barovia setting, to his backstory have started to trickle out a little bit. And, sorry, Jason, I've kept some of that to myself, but I think that's part of Alistair's character, and that's part of what I love, is that as a true neutral, it's like, what can I let out? What should I keep? But even in all of this, while he's figuring that out, I think his first thing has just been like, in both settings, is the who can I trust aspect. But probably the thing that I love the most about Alistair's change from the Sword Coast to Barovia actually is the relationship he has with Anad. Because I think a lot of in the Sword Coast, I mean, no offense Droglar, no offense Stellan, but let's just call this what it is. Anad and Alistair really are the brains of this group, and the people who would like step forward and be what you would call the face of the party. And I think a lot of times, in their own ways, they both wanted, I know you mentioned wanting power, and the best way I can kind of explain what I think it is you're very much the president. You want to be out front, you want to be shaking hands and kissing babies and all of that at this point. And Alistair's been very much more fine to be the chief of staff, so to speak. He's like just in the back, just like letting people do their thing.
The Doug Stamper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Thanks for the House of Card reference.
Yes.
The Doug Stamper of it all.
Yeah.
And I love that, almost in my opinion, both of the characters, when they got to Barovia, like almost immediately that stopped. And it was like, holy crap, like we've only got each other here. Like we need to, like it's fine, just like do your thing and like we'll figure it out. We'll work together and kind of.
So just to stop you for a second, so as a DM, I think early on, it was after our first month or two of actually playing the game, I introduced a question of like, why are you guys together? Why are you guys staying together as a group? And I know for Nod, it was like, if I gain power, I can help good, and these people will help me gain power to help the greater good. At least because Jason and I have discussed D&D almost after every session. We've discussed that issue quite a bit, and Anad does a lot that in the end helps the greater good, especially for the party, but also in a certain sense kind of takes away the player agency of the party.
So yeah, Anad does think that he knows better than everybody else. So through really good starting rolls, allocations of points, and then my different ASIs, he's got an 18 intelligence, and also through a couple items. One item, he's also got a 20 charisma. So he really does think he knows better than everybody else. And then the fact that he grew up as a cloistered scholar, and most of his knowledge came from books. He was taught by clerics and such, so he did learn a lot of their stories as well. But he really does believe he knows best. So there's lots of times he'll just take stuff and it's like, so we've got all this gold. Yeah, we're going to buy you new armor. Or so that's how we got the paladin better armor. We got the druid better armor because it was like, let's go find a dragon and slay it, and then have its scales turned into a version of almost male armor for the druid who can't wear metal. So a Nod really does kind of believe that he does know better than everybody else. And it has worked out, he and I being the face. We do a lot of things together because he's really good at telling if somebody's being dishonest. A Nod can lie to everybody with a 20 charisma, but with a like a 10 or 11 wisdom, he has no clue if he's being lied to. We got a lucky roll this last game though, so I was really happy. But that's how he is about that. And then as for the changes in Barovia for him, we already mentioned a little bit of it. The big thing is he still wants to believe the world is black and white. So I do play a Nod. So I'm autistic. And I play a Nod very much like a lot of the quintessential autistic traits, to where he is a lot more black and white. He's a lot more difficult for him to change. So he has chosen a couple of his black and white rules that he's going to stick with no matter what. One of his big ones, which has actually gotten him arrested and almost got slaughtered by a town guard, at least they thought, was the protection of children. After we saved 2 kids from Granny at the windmill, when we brought him to the town, they refused to let him in. So he scared the guards by using a little bit of thaumaturgy and a little bit of disguise self to make them terrified, and they called over, and he was arrested. He actually thought really hard about this because he wanted to teach them a lesson, but he didn't want the kids or the party to get hurt, because he was inches away from casting Thunderstep, because he was surrounded by an entire company of guards, and lay them all out, more than likely killing most of them, and then disappear 90 feet away. But the kids would have been hurt, so that reined him in. So he actually went to jail for that. But yeah, he's not going to let anything happen to kids. That's why at the dead house, that's why he rushed in ahead of everybody else, because there were 2 children that said they needed help. And he's just been working really hard on that. And then also, you don't treat your servants poorly. He grew up in a well-to-do area, and his grandparents who raised him treated all of their servants very respectfully. So when people don't, he has a problem with it, to the point where, like, the townspeople really just blow him off. Like, we don't care where you come from. That's not the way it is here. But he's adamant about those 2 things.
So, like in Barovia, the enemy, and one of the reasons why the guards were like, I don't care if you have children, they have been in an oppressed society where evil comes in many disguises, and Anad wasn't used to that. I think that's another part and another learning point for Anad, where it's like, I was raised a certain way, and that's really not how the rest of the world operates all the time. Just briefly, we don't have to go down a huge rabbit hole, but I think for me as a DM, and then as Jason, as someone as he mentioned, he's autistic, I think there's been a off-camera, out of what's the word I'm looking for? Session, out of D&D game discussion, where we have both kind of learned a little bit about what the majority, and we don't want to say normal people, but what the majority of people, how they perceive things, versus someone who is autistic that approaches things in a methodical manner and very, you could verify this for me, but a very what I would call logistical manner.
Yeah, not all autistic people, but yeah, that's definitely the way I do that. I like structure. I love structure, and D&D is one of the few places that I kind of am able to let a lot of the structure go. Playing another character really does give me the avenue to kind of bypass a lot of the ways my brain is wired and just be another person. It doesn't always work. If I get too stressed out, a lot of it comes out, and we deal with that, and everybody deals with it really, really well. I've actually been very blessed to have a group that is not hindered by the fact that if I'm stressed out coming into the game, things go bad in the game, and I start personally having an issue, they don't make anything of it, and they give me a moment to calm down. And if I have a personal outburst in the game, which has happened, nobody holds it against me, and that's been actually phenomenal. And seeing that and seeing the way I interact with the world, I was like, you know what? I want to play a character that has some of that, but besides that is very incredibly different from me. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to play him the way I do.
And this, I think, is an advocate for games where me as what I would call a non-autistic, majority of people, and then Jason as someone who is autistic that faces a different perspective of the same challenges. I honestly think it's an advocate for work with people, give people a chance. And if there is an issue of game because in the game because of a difference of perspective, talk it out. And that's Jason and I view things in and out of game very differently. And honestly, every time that there have been some conflict of interest come up, we've talked about it, we've resolved it, and it honestly has worked out better for the game. So I think past that though, I want to know as a DM how you guys have felt and what you perceive the campaign moving forward in Ravenloft. I guess I've asked a few poignant questions, but I think Umbrella, how do you view not only just your character but just the setting in general? How do you feel like the campaign is going?
So Anad, he's been suspicious of everything. Anad knows a lot of the more ancient, archaic languages. He does Fiendish. I could go through the whole list, but like the Fiendish is the important one for this. As he was walking away from Granny, he said goodbye to her in Fiendish, and she reflexively said goodbye to him. See, he didn't trust her from the get-go. It's like dark, dank place, little old lady, happy-go-lucky, pushing around selling pies. He didn't trust her at all. And that distrust has grown more and more. And it got to a head, actually, for him when we got to Vallaki, because the Burgomaster, Anad is very much, evil triumphs when good men do nothing. And that is, the Burgomaster is doing nothing. That is his stance on things. And Anad hates him. He's not a huge fan of Fiona because she's still pushing her own agenda. Not that he wouldn't push his own. Anad, he just doesn't. He thinks his agenda is better than everybody else's. But when he's got to choose between the two, it's still hard for him to not go the third route and just obliterate everybody.
As an interjection, this session tonight, Lady Fiona Voctor told you every man should be able to choose, right?
Yep.
His version of freedom and live how he decides he wants to live. And she asked the entire party, can't you all agree? And Anad, if I remember correctly, Anad readily agreed with that.
He insight checked her, and it's the only time he's done a good insight check. And it came back that she wasn't lying. He's like, all right, I will get behind that. And he's like, I will help your cause. We'll see how well that goes. There are some things that happen that Anad doesn't know about, that if he's told about, it very well might change the way he handles things. So we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, with all the knowledge that Anad has, yeah, he's going to be backing her. And actually, Anad's very frustrated because he was probably only a couple hit points from being able to kill the Burgomaster with a couple of fireballs early on.
What do you feel about from between the Sword Coast and the now? How does Alistair feel as a character? What is he feeling right now? Does he know who he is? Is he feeling confident? Is he feeling afraid? What's he about?
I would have to say that as a character and as the person playing the character, it's been two completely different things. As the person playing Alistair, I have loved Ravenloft. When we kind of jumped in, Chad had sent me a text message and he was like, hey, and just almost dropped one little piece of my backstory. He's like, here. And it was almost just enough to here's a taste. So now getting to play Alistair in this, I think Alistair's just as uneasy as everybody else. But at the same time, I do think that there's now this undercurrent with him where it's maybe I'm here to figure out who I am, or why I'm here, or how am I connected to this place. And I know you had mentioned you weren't very sure of Lady Fiona, and you had insight checked her and you did it well tonight and all of that. If you notice, Alistair didn't insight check her at all.
Yeah, I was kind of caught off guard by that, actually.
He's going to roll with it, and there's reasons he's going to roll with it that you don't know about. And again, just kind of love playing Alistair in this module for that. Even kind of going back to the whole power thing. You know, you had mentioned how Anad studied books and he grew up in a well-to-do area and all of this. And I think it's interesting to see how Anad uses his background and his information to get power his way. But even just as tonight, as we finished up, Chad gave us the opportunity to either take a long rest and get fully healed, or we could take a short rest in Lady Fiona's house and go investigate a noise. And Alistair didn't get hit that much because he just didn't get attacked and still had most of his health. So I chose to take the short rest. Ended up going downstairs into the cellar in Lady Fiona's house and found a secret passage, and basically stumbled across what looks to be some kind of like cult. Basically, it was a guy chained up over a pentagram altar getting slashed up, and there were five hooded figures, and then one guy who looked to be running the whole thing. And Alistair, being the guy that he is, you know, it was like, do you want to go in? Do you want to try to figure something out? And I just had him kind of shut the door and back out and go back upstairs. And in my head already, I'm thinking for next time, it's like, how can Alistair use this information to get the power he's looking for, the information he wants, even if it's from Lady Fiona or from somebody else? And how can he kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, mastermind the whole situation to get himself the power that I think he wants? Because I think he almost teeters on that same edge that Anad does in a different way. Anad thinks if he gets too much power, it could cause a problem, and I think that Alistair wants the power, but I don't think he's as sure as Anad of where that line really is, and how much power can he have without having too much, and what could throw him out of that true neutral setting.
So we have 3 questions kind of rolled together in one because it's already been a fairly long video. So, Isaac's death, what are your character's goals? And then, what do you guys think of Strahd? Let's start with Alistair.
For Isaac's death, the only thing I think Alistair would really think about that is he's probably a little pissed that his whip couldn't rip off his arm to kill him in the battle. I was a little bummed about that, but we tried. For his goals, I would say that his goal still kind of remains somewhat the same, to try to figure out who he is. But I think that the way he approaches that kind of changes with each piece of the puzzle he gets. I almost feel like the way you've done it has been masterful, where you just kind of Hansel and Gretel dropped, a breadcrumb, and then Alistair goes and he eats the bread, and then he sees another one and he gets it and keeps going. So I kind of love that. Strahd, gosh, as a player, Strahd is the bad guy that everybody loves to hate. He shows up and he's just this awful guy. But as a character in game, I think not knowing how he's connected to this whole place, I don't think that Alistair has as much outright hatred for Strahd as everybody else does. Because I think, in my opinion, the way Strahd kind of carries himself with that, the smart remarks and the sly and the dry humor and the slight crassness of it all, I think whether Alistair wants to admit it or not, I think Alistair wants to see a little bit of himself in that. Because I think maybe Alistair even wants to kind of see that kind of power and maybe not take it that far and be that kind of an evil guy about it. But I could definitely see Alistair slowly slipping into that kind of an evil, power-hungry, again, Doug Stamper,
So how the module presents Strahd is he's always supposed to be antagonizing you guys. He's always supposed to be pestering you. He's always supposed to be attacking you and testing your strength. But in my version of Ravenloft, Strahd observes. Strahd's been around. He's been present in one way or another, and he's been observing you, and he's been applauding you guys for your strength. But you really don't know what he's about. You don't know if he's good or evil, or if he's somewhere in between. Ravenloft is supposed to present that ambiguity. It's supposed to present that dilemma, that moral dilemma. Overall, though, how you feel about those situations.
So for Isaac's death, actually, a nod feels guilt because Isaac seemed very childlike. So he kind of fell into that realm of this is who I'm supposed to protect, but he was very. He looked. Anod feels like he was very corrupted by the Burgomaster. But Anod's also the kind of person who he's dead. There's nothing he can do about it. Only time that Isaac got hit by Anod in the whole thing was when Anod escaped with the half elf bard. So he did his best to even avoid anything with him. But he did go back and take his arm because a human with a demonic arm on the intellectual side really intrigued Anod a lot. So he actually disguised self, went out there in the middle of the battlefield, cut off an arm, and brought it back. And he's actually currently cuddled up with it as a pillow.
An Oscar-winning performance, by the way, when you went and took that arm.
Yeah, so that I thought that went really well. As for his goals, he's very much one-sided in his views. If he's going to be in Barovia, he wants to make it a place for his two things to work: for kids to be safe, and for people not to abuse those beneath them. So that's kind of what his goal is, and he's doing just about anything he can to do that. But he's also got another goal: is he wants his group to stop being a group and start being a party. He wants them to have a deeper relationship because Droglar has gone down twice in this campaign. Three times, because he went down again twice. He went down again today, and then last time, and then earlier on. And a Nod, who is a backline fighter, because he's a warlock and he's not hexblade, went down once, and that really threw him. So he's like, okay, we've got to get tighter as a group, and we've got to care more for each other because this can't happen. And luckily, people, each time Droglar's gone down, he's been saved by me twice, and he's been saved by Alistair once. So like we've made sure he was taken care of, and then nobody saved a Nod. So he does have a little bit of frustration about that. Like he was only saved because he had on a cloak that brought him back to 1 hit point. Otherwise, he'd have been down. And his thought as the world was going dark was, I literally just saved all of you as he's going down, and just nobody seemed to notice. And the thing is, in the combat, they probably didn't notice, but he's still, again, low wisdom, very childlike in some of his stuff because he was sheltered. So there's a lot of that. I, as a player, when it comes to Strahd, I really kind of look at him as like he's white knighting Irina. Like, I'm personally totally creeped out by his interactions with Irina. I'm starting to see a neck beard on him. It's so bad. But as a player, as a Nod, I'm not going to share any of his opinions about Strahd.
You know, as far as I go, I've made a lot of videos about me, my perspective on my first campaign that I've ever run. Overall, if there's any other comments or insights that you guys have as far as the campaign is gone, I've very much tried to keep things open. As you know, this is my first real campaign that I've run. I would say if you guys have any other insights or anything, you know.
Well, so usually when we rehash things afterwards, over half the time, I and Anod have very different opinions about what happened. It's definitely interesting because, like, I'll be having conversations like, so did you have a problem? I was like, no, Anod had a problem. I thought it was sweet. We've been really lucky that that Chad has really rolled with the punches, because Anod gets a lot of really high rolls for persuasion and convinces people to do things. And we actually, 2 sessions ago, we had a running joke for about 25 minutes throughout how we just broke Ravenloft, because we literally twisted and convoluted everything for the entire session through persuasion checks, through great sneaking. It was phenomenally played by everybody. But this last time we played, I'm on the same page as Anod. Anod is insanely impressed with how well Alistair and Droglar handled us trying to escape. And also, we've got one of our players is playing Irina until she gets her own character finished getting made, and she used we've statted her out as an Eldritch Knight.
Yeah.
So she used a fog cloud. It's phenomenal. So this episode really started changing Anad's opinion of everybody that was there, because they made very optimal decisions that made it to where he was capable of doing so much more. Because he's always on the verge of thinking, okay, what do I have to do to make sure I save these dolts? Because they stumble around a lot. And it's not the players, it's the characters. It's the bad dice rolls. And Anad just kind of he does have a lofty opinion of himself, which stat-wise I guess makes sense. And so he actually always holds his Thunderstep in his back pocket to save somebody. And everybody did so well, he's like, you know what? I'm going to save this random person that is not part of our party.
Rictavio, for those of you that are watching, Rictavio.
Rictavio was grappled by 2 people, about to be pulled away, and I Thunderstepped him out, killing a bunch of guards and wounding Isaac and all that stuff. And I could only do that because of how well everybody else had done. So it really let Anad just be free, waste the last of his spell slots when he's sitting on like a third of his health. Like it was bad, but he felt confident in the way these people handled everything.
So, as far as Alistair's concerned, what, same question. Overall, Umbrella, insights, observations, how you feel now, where you think things might be going, and especially with the town of Vallaki, how Alistair might be feeling.
I definitely think Alistair is looking forward to what's coming. Obviously, I can't give away too much with his backstory. But I also think, especially with the chaos today and the guards chasing us, and then another pack of guards trying to wrangle a tiger, and then the burgomaster wants us arrested, and all this other stuff, I think that seems to be where Alistair functions best, is when he's got to try to think 9 steps ahead and try to figure out, today, a burglar pack for the win, thank God. Every once in a while I come out with one of those. But it was like, all right, I'm going to tie this rope to trip them up here, and then Droglar's going to use Entangle to slow them down, and if that doesn't work, then I'm going to throw some ball bearings on the ground to try to trip them up. Yeah. And then I think I tried to use, Minor Illusion to make them sound like the tiger to try to scare them off. And I think that's probably been my favorite part with Alistair in the last couple sessions, is just watching him evolve and use these different abilities and try to... I think you said it best earlier, to Doug Stamper the party, to be the guy in the background who thinks he knows best and is trying to run this whole thing. But overall, as somebody who came into this never playing D&D, this is my first campaign. Alistair's my first character. My big observation would be, if you've never played D&D, if you've never gotten into this, if you're thinking about it. If you're worried that it's a complete nerd thing that you're going to play in your mom's basement, you're probably right.
But this is my basement.
Yeah, Jason's mom doesn't live here. But my observation is, go for it. Go all in. Don't be one of those people who's like, I think our practice session, we were like rolling for our characters. I think your exact line was, don't say that your character's name is Batavia and you're from Buttkiss and that's your entire backstory. I think that's what you had said. Don't be Batavia from Buttkiss. Give it a little bit of thought, and to be able to kind of go all in and invest in it, and just kind of get to play it and be super obnoxious and be weird, and anything you think you can throw at the wall to see what sticks, like, go for it, because the investment is so much fun and so relaxing to get to know people and just to kind of let loose and just kind of see what happens and roll with the punches. It's been a great ride.
And to build on that, so he's new. He's a new DM. Hasn't played much, but he's played a lot of other games. We've got another veteran who's been playing his entire life. It sounds like. He's a D&D veteran.
D&D veteran. All right, gotcha.
And then we've got one other new person, and then our newest addition has played before. She played some Pathfinder and a little bit of D&D way back when, and I've been playing off and on for over 20 years. So we've got a wide variety of a group, and it's really worked well for us. I don't think anybody's walked away anytime saying that whole session was horrible, and we've all had a lot of really fun times, and we've learned a lot, because this is actually my first time playing 5. I've played 3, 5. I've played 2. I've played a lot of this stuff. I haven't played 5 before. I've obviously watched it because that's what everybody plays now. But it's been really good for us. And the thing is, one of the things I really enjoy that makes the sessions go better is if there's a confusion, Chad will make a ruling and say we'll figure out the way it's supposed to be later, and everybody's okay with that. And then when another guy, Dan and I are there, we're the nerds that look it up while the rest of the stuff's going on. And if Chad asks us, we share it, but we also don't share it with him right then because he's kind of in charge, and that'd be kind of douchey.
Okay, so at the end, my camera cut off, the battery died. So there really wasn't a wrap up with our conversation, but we were pretty close to the end anyways. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this gave you a little bit more insight into the campaign. Again, like I mentioned in the video, if you want to know more about what has happened previously, check out the other videos. Probably won't be having another video until after the new year. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, bye-bye.
I'm a little bit of a mix of Leslie Knope and Donna Meagle.